All right, everyone, it's time for another criticism of Donald Trump, which is specifically whether it's 4D chess or not. Again, owing up to the fact that it could be, even if we assume that Trump knows what he's talking about, and this is part of some grand strategy on like outwitting the Democrats on guns or whatever, we still have to, in order for A/B testing to work, you have to point out the fact that someone's saying something that's off kilter, that's simply not true. It sounds a lot like Tipper Gore a la the early 90s or something. Donald Trump, at least in a projective sense, does not know what he's talking about with regards to video games. Number one, we've got a rating system on video games, which he alluded to. He's like, well, we need a rating system for movies and video games. Okay. You can't possibly, that part has got to be 4D chess. There's no possible way that he's not aware that we already have a rather draconian rating system. It goes beyond that. It goes to music, too. Look, the DC Housewives, led by Tipper Gore, a Democrat, you'll remember, Al Gore's wife. They were the ones that proposed all of these sort of warning sticker things. Before that, there was no sort of warning sticker system for music, video games, and stuff. Now, of course, an early T-rated game, something like GoldenEye 007, now we look back, claims were made about these games, we're talking early, mid-90s. Not exactly the most sophisticated, high-definition, total 3D graphics, totally immersive, tubular, man. Not exactly realistic. For the era was, good, but in retrospect, not so much. The claim was made that if kids played GoldenEye or Hexen and some of this others, they would get violent. That never happened. The crime rate in this country is actually, again, I have to keep talking about this every time crime comes up. It's at a 50-year low in this country, almost a 60-year low. During that same period where it dropped off from its peak in the 90s, you've had a steady march towards ever more progress, technologically speaking. Video games in that decade period get a million times more realistic. Going from 007 to going to like Fallout 4, Skyrim or something, there is no actual comparison between the two. And now the next generation of gaming is going to begin to emerge too. It's going to blow the stuff that we've got now out of the water. And it's going to be insane. Wait 10, 20 years, see what video games look and play like. It's going to be a totally different world. My best bet is no more standalone titles for the most part, unless it's like arcade-style stuff or just distractions for your phone. The sort of PC/console gaming where you're sitting there doing something, it's going to be more immersive, and titles will never be retired. They'll simply be modded and have downloadable content over and over forever to constantly patch them and make them different. That's the sort of franchises of the future that are going to look more like that, I think. That's the movement we're going in. But here's the thing. During that same period where crime drops off, video games get a million times more expansive, more believable. Music gets more hardcore. The rise of black metal had no effect on people's psyches whatsoever. No, it actually didn't. Look, around the time that you have the revival of heavy metal in the form of Death Clock and stuff like that, and you have some of this edgy content being made, violence is falling off a cliff. You know why? Because people are achieving catharsis, number one. I've spoken about that. The same thing with movies. Same thing with all of these things. Video games, whatever. They're achieving catharsis, number one. And because of the internet, which the Democrats primarily blame for violence, they're also totally fucking wrong. Because of that, people who were socially isolated now can have a friend or something. They can be part of a community. Maybe it moderates them somewhat. They can be challenged on their views. Look, you want crime to rise tenfold, all you have to do is crack down on the internet some more. Keep people like me from properly debating people who actually are potentially violent fanatics, talking them down off of the ledge. You stop us from doing that by making it so that we're not willing to touch touchy issues anymore. Yeah, you'll have more crime. You'll have plenty of it. Then you can finally have a reason for wanting your gun control because there will actually be a crime wave in the country. Not right now where it's back to near nifty 50 levels of gun violence. I'm talking about like Meet the Cleavers style levels of gun violence. It's like, little Jimmy, he can walk around with his fake revolver and doesn't have to worry about the cop thinking that it's real because the cop's not under any stress. Like, yeah, it's basically Barney Fife mode. Now, here's the thing. Video game violence doesn't cause real world violence. If anything, there's an inverse correlation. Now, we can't prove that. There are other variables. Rise of the internet, availability of violent video games, cathartic, potentially violent music, wider access to, maybe in the online, education, of course, before. Here's another thing. Some kid get bored. You know, you got your little small town libraries and you're in the burbs, and you've got your little library and stuff. It's like, well, there's nothing to read, there's nothing on TV because cable sucks by the end of the 90s. What the fuck am I going to do? Now you can go online, and so you can find something more interesting, more to your taste, a game, books, whatever. I think there's less boredom, even though there's also more boredom. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition there. Now, the rise of technology, if anything, is improving many of these things. It's, you know, the people that are scared of the establishmentarians, Trump needs to understand this. His enemies are terrified of the internet. They're terrified of lack of censorship because it's a hurting neoliberalism. If he really wants to crack down on the globalist bullshit, he'll make sure to stand in the way of any additional censorship. And keep in mind, the good liberal Democrats under Gore were the ones that put this into place. You'll remember, by the way, hypocrisy 101. Most people don't remember this. Tipper Gore and all these others, originally they wanted to have like homosexual references be a reason to have an 18+ sticker on music and games and stuff. So you'd have like a gay characters. This head Democrat herself, like the ideological head DC housewife herself, Tipper Gore, Al Gore, you know, Al Gore lockbox, Al Gore who invented the internet, Al Gore with 3 private jets that he uses to go around and talk about carbon emissions. That Al Gore, his wife was the one that spearheaded all of this. Yeah, talk about a shitty, second lady. Yeah, second lady. She was playing second fiddle to whoever else Al Gore was with at the time. Probably a concern within their personal life. Wonder why she wanted decency and moralism. These are just pearl clutchers. Look, people have made claims like this long before the technological revolution. It was violence on TV, like, oh, this cowboy movie, you're filling your head with nonsense, Jimmy. You know, it's the late 50s. He's watching, like, maybe, or like Gunsmoke. It's so violent, it's going to make little Jimmy violent. No, it's not going to make little Jimmy violent. It's a fucking show on TV. Trust me, the average kid, by the time they're old enough to play the video game or you know, competently browse the internet, has just enough sense to understand the difference between real and not real. Sometimes you get someone who's severely mentally ill or just fucking cracked, and yeah, they're not going to be able to tell the difference. Look, they're going to be cracked regardless. Doesn't matter if you deprive them of every violent video game. You could have, they get no movies, no books, no video games, just they're living in a bubble. There's still going to be, there's still going to be a violent ideation of some sort going on. It's totally wrong. If you were to ban outright all forms of multimedia violence, you know, no violent video games, no violent movies, crime would rise. It wouldn't go down. If you were to censor the internet the way the left wants to, because more extremism, more fanatics, more violent ideologies, crime will go up. Trust me. Absolutely. I can guarantee it. Look, if they get their way, we'll get to see it. You'll get to see proof of what I'm saying being true. You know, the rise of these things helps people. Also, it's also funny how the rise in the opiate epidemic, maybe it's people are so doped out that they're turning like property crime and away from violent crime. They're just too strung out to be violent. You know, they can't be. They're like, oh, I'm too high and I can't even get out of bed. Maybe I'll go rob someone when I need my fix next. You know, I need those Percocets. I need some Oxys, Vicodin. It's crazy. But violent video games are not going to cause violence. If they did, you'd have higher crime today, certainly, than in the 90s when it peaked. Like 90s, violent video games. What's video game violence in the early mid-90s when violent crime actually had its peak? Violent video games. GoldenEye. That's basically as violent. Hexen. Hexen was about as violent and gory as a guy. You can get fucking Doom Generator graphics. Does that honestly look realistic? In retrospect, were all of the moralistic statements about these things correct? Pokemon. Same thing I can remember from, you know, sort of, late preteen sticks. I like Pokemon. We're talking late 90s. And people at the time were saying, Pokemon's going to cause violence. Look, these, basically, the idea of the game is you train animals to attack one another. You know, they don't die, they just faint, but you train them to attack one another. And they have all of these, they're blasting each other fireballs and, like, and the fucking shards of ice and pounding each other in the face. Oh, it's so violent, it's horrible. Little kids shouldn't be playing. It never caused violence, are you nuts? Harry Potter, it's like when the Christians said Harry Potter is going to cause a resurgence of Wicca or something. No, the internet did. The internet caused a lot of occultism. No wonder, you know, moralists wanted to go after it. Now it's the opposite. Now it's like the left wants to go after it, and they think it'll cause Nazis or Russian bots or whatever. Before it was evangelicals. They thought it's gonna cause kids to they'll be gay, they'll turn to sorcery. Not really. Like, the availability of books, like actual cult books, more important for that than Harry Potter. But they were terrified of them. They're terrified of the internet. You know, I was looking up the Encyclopedia of Diarrhea on the internet when I was like, you know, a little bit on the young side to be doing stuff like that. And then harassing people in chat rooms, but it never made me violent or degenerated or anything. No, the violent, degenerated people are the ones that lived in a bubble and then they got introduced to the real world and snapped, or people who were raised up in some crime-ridden, infested region anyway, who look, they're living in some urban slum. Their family is presumably not wealthy enough for them to sit there playing Grand Theft Auto all day. No, they're probably doing Grand Theft Auto in real life. There's your fucking problem. Why don't you focus more on mental health and education, give people a future, scale back the globalism and censorship, make them feel like they're part of a larger community? Now, that might help. You know, that's what helped to begin with. It actually worked. The internet's a great thing. Violent video games are great. Fallout 4 is one of my favorites. Look, part of the reason you play Fallout 4 is you run around with a super sledge and beat things in the head. You can chop the dead bodies apart if you want to. And that would seem gratuitous years ago, with GTA 3. It's like, oh, I shot this dude and his leg, was blown off. At the time, it was like people freaking out. You hire a hooker. You can't see anything. It's just you sitting in the car with the car bouncing up and down. Oh, it's so realistic. Now we look back, we look at it as Legoland. It looks like Minecraft, practically. At the time, though, people were really, really concerned. Despite the fact that the music in these fucking games was from the fucking 80s and 90s. GTA San Andreas, one of the all-time great soundtracks, Vice City. By the way, I did hear that there is the possibility, this could be just totally a rumor, that the next GTA will be a remake of Vice City, which would be great. Oh, it would definitely be a reason to buy it. I'd have it the next day. Absolutely. Then they were saying, well, it's going to have a female protagonist. Who cares? You can mod that. You can mod games nowadays. Get it on PC. Just don't use a console. Look, consoles are going to have problems keeping up with modern gaming increasingly. So Fallout 3 was touch and go. Fallout 4, you play it on an Alienware, it's like, lag-free, 60 frames a second. It doesn't matter what's on the screen. And there are laptops, you can see them. Have half that processing power, they can do fine. Then you play it on console, and it's like, oh, yeah, I'll play this game in 10 years when it loads, if it ever does. About violent video games being a problem. They're not a problem. I've been raised on violent video games. Like, the most violent games I could get a hold of were the ones I wanted to play. Like, Hexen was great, early 90s. GTA 3, although I skipped to Vice City, and Vice City was way better except for map size. Everything about Vice City was perfect except for the map. The map sucked. The map was like San Fierro from San Andreas, I think, alone was bigger than Vice City. And San Andreas, by the way, the map wasn't as big as a lot of people thought. It had a lot of twisty and turny roads, but if you went up in the air, you saw how it was considerably smaller. But it was still vast for PS2 era. It was pretty good. They remake that, it was great. They basically remade 3. You go back to Liberty City, it was great. I can't wait to see them do that with Vice City. They probably waited because Vice City was so perfect. It's so ripe for like the greatest title of all time. You've got the aesthetic, you've got the music, everything about it's perfect except the map. And with modern graphics, I mean, it'd kick ass. You can imagine it'd be better than GTA 5. You're talking pretty fucking realistic at that point. Yeah, that'd definitely be one to mod, though. Be one to really have fun with. That's about all. Peace out.